November 28, 1944. The Pacific Ocean. 72,000 tons. That is how much the Japanese aircraft carrier Shinano weighed when she slipped out of Yokosuka Naval Arsenal on her maiden voyage. To put that number in perspective, she was heavier than the Titanic. Heavier than most battleships ever built. Her flight deck stretched nearly 3 football fields long. Her armor was so thick that Japanese engineers calculated she could survive 20 torpedo hits and keep fighting. 20. Most carriers in World War II sank after 3 or 4 hits. The Imperial Japanese Navy called her unsinkable. They called her the future of naval warfare. They called her their last hope. And hunting her through the darkness that night was a single American submarine, commanded by a man named Joseph Enright. A man the Navy had almost written off. A man who had missed his shot 18 months earlier and spent every day since carrying the weight of that failure. In the next 7 hours, Enright would fire 6 torpedoes at the largest target any submarine commander had ever engaged. 4 would hit. And when the sun rose on November 29, 1944, 72,000 tons of Japanese supercarrier would be at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean, taking 1,400 men and Japan's last hope with it. This is the story of how one man's redemption became history's greatest submarine kill. This is the story of the night everything went catastrophically wrong for the Japanese Empire. But to understand how impossible this victory truly was, you need to understand what Shinano was supposed to be. Let us go back to 1940. The world is sliding toward war, and Japan is preparing for the inevitable confrontation with the United States. The Imperial Japanese Navy has embarked on the most ambitious shipbuilding program in human history. They are constructing the Yamato-class battleships, the largest and most powerful warships the world has ever seen. Yamato and Musashi, each displaced over 70,000 tons. Their 18-inch guns could fire shells the size of small automobiles over 25 miles. Nothing in the American fleet could match them. Nothing in any fleet could match them. And there was supposed to be a third. Hull number 110 laid down at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal in May 1940. She was originally designed to be Shinano, the third Yamato-class super battleship. But then December 7, 1941 happened. Pearl Harbor changed everything. The Japanese attack proved that aircraft carriers, not battleships, were now the dominant force in naval warfare. Battleships were vulnerable. Carriers were the future. And 6 months later, the Battle of Midway hammered that lesson home with devastating clarity. In a single day, Japan lost 4 of her frontline aircraft carriers. Akagi, Kaga, Soryu, Hiryu, gone. Thousands of trained pilots and crew, gone. The cream of Japanese naval aviation, gone. So in June 1942, the Japanese Navy made a desperate decision. Hull 110 would not be completed as a battleship. Instead, she would be converted into something the world had never seen. The largest, most heavily armored, most survivable aircraft carrier ever conceived. This is where Shinano became terrifying. Most aircraft carriers are built for speed and aircraft capacity. They have thin hulls designed for quick maneuvering. They carry as many planes as possible. They avoid damage because they cannot survive it. Shinano was different. Because she started life as a battleship, she had a battleship's protection. 16 inches of steel belt armor along her waterline. An armored flight deck, 8 inches thick. Most carriers had wooden flight decks that bombs could punch through like paper. Shinano's deck was designed to shrug off direct hits. Her watertight compartmentalization divided the ship into hundreds of separate sealed sections. If one section flooded, you sealed it off and kept fighting. If 10 sections flooded, you sealed them off and kept fighting. Japanese naval architects ran the calculations over and over. They concluded that Shinano could absorb 20 torpedo hits distributed across her hull before flooding would threaten to sink her. For context, USS Yorktown at Midway took 2 torpedo hits and eventually sank. HMS Ark Royal took 1 torpedo and went down. Most carriers were lucky to survive 3 impacts. Shinano was designed to be invulnerable. She was designed to be the ship that would turn the tide of the Pacific War. But building the world's largest aircraft carrier in the middle of a losing war creates problems that no amount of armor can solve. By late 1944, Japan is being systematically destroyed. American submarines are strangling Japanese supply lines. American bombers are reducing Japanese cities to ashes. The Pacific Island chain is collapsing like dominoes, and American forces are getting close enough to threaten the Japanese home islands themselves. This meant that Yokosuka Naval Arsenal, where Shinano was being built, was now within range of American B-29 bombers. Every day that Shinano sat in the shipyard was another day she might be destroyed before she ever put to sea. So in November 1944, the Japanese Navy made the decision that would doom their greatest ship. Commission Shinano immediately. Get her out of the shipyard. Move her to a safer location where she can be completed properly. The problem was that Shinano was not ready. Watertight doors were not all installed. Damage control systems were not fully operational. The crew had been aboard for less than 2 weeks. They did not know their ship. They had not completed basic training drills. But the admirals looked at the intelligence reports showing American bombers getting closer every day, and they made their choice. Risk the incomplete ship on a short voyage, or risk losing her to bombs in the shipyard. They chose the voyage. November 19, 1944. Shinano is officially commissioned into the Imperial Japanese Navy. Captain Toshio Abe takes command. He is an experienced officer, but this is his first time commanding a ship this size. Aboard are 176 officers and men, plus hundreds of civilian workers still installing equipment. The ship is loaded with supplies, 50 training aircraft, spare parts, ammunition, fuel. The plan is simple. Sail from Yokosuka to Kuri Naval Base about 340 miles along the Japanese coast. 1 short voyage. Hug the coastline. Travel at night to avoid American aircraft. 3 destroyer escorts for protection. What could possibly go wrong? But there was one factor the Japanese had not considered. A factor that was about to change everything. His name was Joseph Enright. November 28, 1944. USS Archerfish submarine, SS-311, is on her 5th war patrol in the Pacific. She is a Balao-class fleet submarine, 312 feet long, displacing one 500-ton surfaced, fast, reliable, armed with 10 torpedo tubes. And commanding her is a 35-year-old officer, who is by his own admission hunting for redemption. Joseph Enright carries a wound that does not show on any medical record. It is the wound of failure. May 1943, 18 months earlier. Enright was commanding a different submarine, USS Dace, on patrol in the Pacific. And he had what submariners call a golden opportunity. His boat encountered a Japanese aircraft carrier with minimal escort. Perfect firing position. Ideal range. A shot that should have been automatic. Enright calculated the solution, gave the order, and fired a full spread of torpedoes. Every single one missed. Not because of bad luck, not because of equipment failure, because Joseph Enright miscalculated the target speed and fired at the wrong moment. Every torpedo passed harmlessly ahead or astern of the carrier. The carrier that should have been his greatest kill sailed away untouched. The Navy does not court-martial commanders for a single mistake. But Enright was quietly rotated off Dace and spent months in administrative assignments, while other submarine commanders racked up kills and earned medals. It was the kind of failure that haunts a naval officer. The shot you missed. The opportunity you wasted. The enemy that got away because you made a mistake. But the Navy gave Enright a second chance. In March 1944, he was given command of USS Archerfish. And for 8 months, he has been making that boat into one of the most efficient submarines in the Pacific. The crew trusts him. The boat runs smoothly. But he has not had the big score. The kind of kill that erases past failures and makes a reputation. That is about to change. November 28, 1944. 8:48 p.m. Archerfish is running on the surface southeast of Tokyo Bay, recharging her batteries after a day spent submerged. Surface running is dangerous but necessary. Diesel-electric submarines run on battery power when underwater, but those batteries need to be recharged by running the diesel engines. And diesel engines need air, which means surfacing. It is a clear night. Calm seas, good visibility. And then the radar operator calls out a contact. Bearing 9 new. Range 25,000 yards. Multiple ships. Moving fast. Heading southwest along the Japanese coast. Enright reaches the bridge in seconds. He raises his binoculars and scans the horizon. And then he sees something that makes his heart stop. 4 ships. 3 smaller vessels. Destroyers. Clearly escorts. And in the center, something massive. A silhouette too large to be a cruiser. Too large to be a battleship. Enright has been hunting submarines in the Pacific for 2 years. He knows every major Japanese ship class by silhouette. He has never seen anything this big. The problem is clear immediately. The target is fast. Radar plots the contact at 18 to 20 knots, faster than Archerfish can manage on the surface, and it is zigzagging, changing course every few minutes to throw off submarine attacks. This is every submarine commander's nightmare scenario. You have found a target, a massive, clearly important target, but it is moving too fast and maneuvering too well for you to catch it. Most commanders would radio the contact to headquarters and hope another submarine could intercept. Enright makes a different choice. He knows these waters. He knows the Japanese coastal routes, and he can predict where that target is going. Instead of chasing directly after the target, he will race ahead. Position Archerfish in the target's projected path. And wait. It is a crazy gamble. If he is wrong about the target's destination, he loses contact and wastes the opportunity. If he is right, he will be perfectly positioned for an attack. For the next 4 hours, Archerfish races south at maximum speed, diesel engines straining, trying to get ahead of the target while staying on the surface to maintain speed. And all the while, Enright is thinking about May 1943, about the carrier he missed, about the shot he wasted, about the reputation he is still trying to rebuild. He is not going to miss this time. November 29, 1944. Just after midnight. Archerfish has been racing south for over 3 hours, and Enright is starting to second-guess his decision. They have lost radar contact with the target. They are running on assumptions and calculations. If those assumptions are wrong, they have wasted an entire night chasing ghosts. And then the radar operator's voice breaks the tension. Contact bearing 270. Range 12,000 yards. They are back. Enright's gamble paid off. The Japanese task force is exactly where he predicted. Steaming southwest toward the Key Strait. And now Archerfish is ahead of them. In perfect position. The order comes quickly. Take her down to periscope depth. Make ready all tubes. Prepare for attack. Archerfish slips beneath the surface. Silent running protocols take effect. The boat becomes a ghost drifting in the dark Pacific, waiting for the target to come to her. Enright raises the periscope for the first time, and what he sees through that lens will haunt him for the rest of his life. An aircraft carrier so massive, it makes every other ship he has ever seen look like a toy. The flight deck stretches almost 900 feet. The island superstructure rises like a mountain. The sheer mass of the hull displaces water in a way that creates a bow wave visible even in total darkness. Enright has studied silhouettes of every Japanese carrier. This is not a Kagi. This is not Kaga. This is not Shokaku or Zuikaku. This is something new, something the intelligence reports never mentioned, a supercarrier. But there are 3 destroyer escorts actively hunting for submarines. If they detect Archerfish before the torpedoes are away, the submarine becomes the target. For 40 minutes, Enright stalks his prey, tracking her zigzags, calculating her base course, waiting for the perfect moment. And then Shinano completes a zig and steadies on a new heading. For the next few minutes, she will be on a straight, predictable course. This is the moment. Final bearing and shoot. The calculations are made. Range 1, 400 yards. Target speed, 18 knots. Angle on bow, 70 degrees starboard. Enright's hand hovers over the firing button. He thinks about May 1943. About the carrier that got away. Not this time. Fire 1. Fire 2. Fire 3. Fire 4. Fire 5. Fire 6. 6. Mark 14 torpedoes leave Archerfish's forward tubes at 4-second intervals. Each carries 640 pounds of Torpex explosive. Running time to target approximately 90 seconds. The crew counts silently. 60 seconds, 70 seconds, 80 seconds, and then the first explosion echoes through Archerfish's hull. Then a second, then a third, then a fourth. 4 hits. The crew erupts in subdued cheers. 4 torpedoes have slammed into the largest target any submarine has ever engaged. On any normal ship, this would be catastrophic. But Shinano is not a normal ship. She was designed to survive 20 torpedo hits. She has only taken 4. The question now is simple. Will the unsinkable carrier live up to her name, or has Joseph Enright just accomplished something the entire Japanese Navy believed to be impossible? In Part 2, we will descend into the flooding compartments of Shinano. We will watch as Captain Abe fights desperately to save his ship. We will see the fatal flaws that turned 4 torpedo hits into a death sentence for the largest carrier ever built. And we will witness the 7 hours of chaos, desperation, and horror that transformed Shinano from the pride of the Imperial Japanese Navy into the greatest submarine kill in history. The clock is now ticking. The water is rising. And 1,400 men are about to discover that unsinkable is just a word. 4 torpedoes. That is all it took. 4 torpedoes from a single American submarine had just slammed into the side of the largest aircraft carrier ever built. A ship designed to survive 20 hits. A ship the Imperial Japanese Navy called unsinkable. Commander Joseph Enright had made his shot. After 18 months of carrying the weight of failure, after 4 hours of desperate pursuit, through the darkness, after calculating and recalculating every variable, he had put 4 Mark 14 torpedoes into the biggest target any submarine commander had ever engaged. But as Archerfish slipped away into the depths to evade the destroyer escorts, one question remained unanswered. Was it enough? Shinano was no ordinary carrier. She had battleship armor. She had hundreds of watertight compartments. She had been engineered by the finest naval architects in Japan to absorb punishment that would obliterate any other ship afloat. 4 hits should not sink her. 4 hits should not even slow her down. And yet in the next 7 hours, everything that the Japanese believed about their greatest ship would be proven catastrophically wrong. This is where the story of Shinano transforms from a tale of submarine warfare into something far more terrifying. A story of institutional arrogance, of fatal shortcuts, of a ship that was doomed before she ever left the shipyard. Let us go inside Shinano at the moment of impact. November 29, 1944. 3:17 a.m. Most of the 176 men aboard are asleep or standing routine watch. The ship has been steaming for 9 hours without incident. Captain Toshio Abe is confident. They are hugging the Japanese coast. They have 3 destroyer escorts. They are traveling at night. American submarines rarely operate this close to the home islands. And then, 4 massive explosions tear through the starboard side of his ship. The first torpedo hits amidships, punching through the outer hull plating and detonating inside one of the boiler rooms. The explosion is instantaneous and absolute. Everyone in that compartment dies before they can register what is happening. Seawater rushes through the breach at thousands of gallons per minute. The second torpedo hits 20 feet away, breaching another boiler room. More flooding. More casualties. The third and fourth torpedoes strike forward and aft of the first 2 impacts, creating a line of destruction along Shinano's starboard side. On the bridge, Captain Abe receives the damage reports. His training tells him exactly what to do. This is what Shinano was built for. Seal the damaged compartments, activate the pumps, maintain speed and heading. The watertight doors will contain the flooding. The armor will prevent further damage. The ship will survive. Abe looks at the initial assessment. 4 torpedo hits. Multiple compartments flooded. But the ship is still making way, still under power. The list to starboard is noticeable, perhaps 5 degrees but manageable. He makes his decision. Maintain course for Kure. Damage control parties will handle the flooding. They will reach port and make repairs in safety. This is precisely what Shinano was designed to do. What Captain Abe does not know, what he cannot know, is that his ship has a fatal secret. A secret that the admirals who rushed her into service chose to ignore. A secret that is about to kill 1,400 of his men. Remember what we discussed in Part 1. Shinano was commissioned early. She was pushed out of the shipyard incomplete because American bombers were getting close to Yokosuka. The admirals made a calculated decision. Risk an incomplete ship on a short voyage, rather than risk losing her to enemy bombs. But incomplete meant more than just missing equipment. It meant that not all of Shinano's watertight doors were properly installed. It meant that many of the seals between compartments were temporary. It meant that the hundreds of civilian workers still aboard had created passages and openings throughout the ship to move equipment and materials. In theory, each flooded compartment should be completely isolated from its neighbors. In theory, water should stay exactly where it enters. In practice, Shinano is bleeding internally. Water is spreading through gaps in bulkheads, through hatches that were never properly sealed, through cable runs and ventilation ducts that were supposed to be blocked but are not. And the crew, many of whom have been aboard for less than 2 weeks, does not know their ship well enough to find and seal these breaches. 30 minutes after the torpedo hits, Shinano's list has increased from 5 degrees to 10 degrees. Captain Abe receives this report with growing concern. 10 degrees is not critical, but the rate of change is troubling. The list should be stabilizing as damage control contains the flooding. Instead, it is getting worse. He orders all available personnel to damage control efforts. Pumps are running at maximum capacity. Teams are racing through the ship trying to seal every breach they can find. But for every hole they plug, water finds another path. The ship is too new. The crew is too inexperienced. And the clock is ticking. 1 hour after the attack. 4:17 a.m. The list has reached 12 degrees. Engineering reports that water is now entering compartments that were not damaged by the torpedo impacts. This is the moment when Captain Abe begins to understand the true nature of his situation. The flooding is not contained. It is spreading. Somewhere in the depths of his ship, water is finding paths that should not exist. He orders speed reduced to 15 knots, hoping to decrease the pressure forcing water through the breaches. He orders counter-flooding on the port side, pumping seawater into undamaged compartments to balance the list. These are textbook responses. They should work. They do not work. 2 hours after the attack. 5:17 a.m. The list is now 15 degrees. Shinano is visibly leaning to starboard. Walking on the deck requires holding on to railings. Equipment is beginning to slide. And then damage control reports something that turns Captain Abe's blood to ice. Water has reached the forward aviation fuel storage tanks. Aviation fuel. Thousands of gallons of highly flammable gasoline. The fuel is lighter than water, so it floats on top of the flooding seawater. It spreads through flooded compartments, coating every surface. The fumes fill the air with a toxic explosive mixture. Crew members in the affected areas begin collapsing from the vapors. Others vomit uncontrollably. And everyone knows what will happen if there is a single spark. Meanwhile, aboard USS Archerfish, Commander Enright has ordered the submarine deep and is running silent. Standard procedure after a torpedo attack. The 3 Japanese destroyers are hunting furiously, dropping depth charges in search patterns, trying to find and kill the submarine that attacked their charge. Enright cannot know if he has sunk his target or merely damaged it. He cannot surface to observe. All he can do is evade, survive, and hope. The depth charges explode around Archerfish, some close enough to shake the boat violently. The crew maintains absolute silence. One dropped wrench, one spoken word could give away their position. For hours they drift in the darkness, waiting for the destroyers to give up the hunt. Enright thinks about the target. That massive silhouette through the periscope. The 4 explosions he heard. 4 hits on a carrier that size should be devastating. But this target was enormous. Bigger than anything he had ever seen. Maybe it survived. Maybe his shot was not enough. The uncertainty gnaws at him. After 18 months of carrying one failure, has he just created another? Back on Shinano, the situation has become catastrophic. 3 hours after the attack. 6:17 a.m. List 18 degrees. The flooding has reached the engine rooms. The massive turbines that drive Shinano's propellers are being submerged. Power generation begins to fail. One by one, electrical systems go offline. Pumps that were fighting the flooding lose power. Emergency lighting flickers. The ship that was supposed to be unsinkable is dying, and there is nothing her crew can do to stop it. Captain Abe faces the hardest decision of his career. He can see the numbers. He can feel his ship rolling further to starboard with every passing minute. The flooding is uncontrollable. The fuel vapors are spreading. If he waits too long, the ship could capsize, suddenly trapping thousands of men below decks. Or the fuel could ignite, turning Shinano into a floating inferno. He gives the order that no captain ever wants to give. Prepare to abandon ship. But abandoning a ship this size is not a simple matter of lowering lifeboats. Shinano was rushed into service. Many of her lifeboats were never properly installed. Life rafts have to be manually released, and the severe list makes it nearly impossible to launch boats from the port side. The ship is leaning so far to starboard that the portside lifeboats are hanging uselessly in the air. 4 hours after the attack. 7:17 a.m. Dawn is breaking over the Pacific. The sun rises on a scene of desperate chaos. Shinano's list has reached 23 degrees. The massive carrier is leaning so far that her flight deck looks like a ski slope. Men are clinging to anything bolted down. Equipment is sliding across compartments, crushing anyone in its path. The smell of aviation fuel is everywhere, and the ship is settling lower in the water as more compartments flood. At 7:30 a.m., Captain Abe gives the final order. Abandon ship, all hands, abandon ship. What follows is 7 minutes of pure horror. Men scramble for any exit they can find. Some make it to the deck and jump into the water. Some with life jackets. Many without. Others are trapped below as hatches jam or passageways flood. The 3 destroyer escorts move in to pick up survivors, but they cannot get too close. If Shinano capsizes suddenly, the suction could pull them down as well. The water around the dying carrier fills with swimming men shouting for help, struggling against the current created by the sinking ship. 5 hours after the attack. 9:00 a.m. Shinano's list has reached 30 degrees. The flight deck is now angled like a steep hillside. No one can stand on it anymore. Men are sliding down the deck into the water. The massive ship is rolling onto her side, and there is nothing anyone can do to stop it. Captain Abe is still aboard. Naval tradition says the captain goes down with his ship. But Abe knows his duty extends beyond tradition. He must survive to report what happened, to explain how the unsinkable Shinano was sunk by 4 torpedoes, to ensure this disaster is never repeated. 6 hours after the attack. 10:18 a.m. Shinano capsizes. The largest aircraft carrier ever built rolls completely onto her starboard side. For a moment she floats there, her flight deck vertical, her hull exposed to the morning sun like the belly of a dying whale. Men who were trapped inside are thrown against bulkheads. Water rushes through every opening. The sounds from inside the ship are described by survivors as the screams of hell itself. Metal shrieking, water roaring, and the cries of trapped men who know they are about to die. And then Shinano begins her final plunge. The stern rises out of the water. Her massive propellers, each one 3 stories tall, rotate slowly in the air, still trying to drive a ship that no longer exists. The bow goes down first, pulling the rest of the ship with it. At 10:57 a.m., November 29, 1944, exactly 7 hours and 40 minutes after Commander Joseph Enright fired his torpedoes, the largest aircraft carrier ever built disappears beneath the surface of the Pacific Ocean. She takes 135 men with her. Some drowned in flooded compartments, never knowing what hit them. Some were crushed by sliding equipment. Some made it into the water, but could not reach the rescue ships before exhaustion and hypothermia claimed them. Captain Toshio Abe survived. He was pulled from the water by one of the destroyers. He would spend the rest of his life haunted by the loss of his ship and his men. The destroyers searched the area for hours, pulling survivors from the water, recovering bodies, looking for any sign of the submarine that destroyed their greatest ship. They find nothing. Archerfish has escaped. Somewhere beneath the waves, Commander Joseph Enright and his crew are making their way back to base, still uncertain whether their target survived or sank. They will not learn the truth for weeks, and when they do, they will discover that they have accomplished something that military historians will study for generations. 4 torpedoes, 7 hours, 72,000 tons of Japanese supercarrier, gone. But the story does not end here. Because the sinking of Shinano was more than just a military victory. It was a blow to the very soul of the Imperial Japanese Navy. And the way Japan responded to this disaster reveals just how desperate their situation had become. In Part 3, we will explore the aftermath. We will see how the Japanese government classified the sinking at the highest level, hiding the truth even from their own people. We will follow Commander Enright back to base, where naval intelligence will initially refuse to believe his claims. We will watch as the pieces come together as intercepted communications and post-war records confirm the impossible truth. And we will discover what the loss of Shinano truly meant for Japan. Because Shinano was not just a ship. She was a symbol, proof that Japan could still build superweapons, still compete with American industrial might, still turn the tide of the war. And now she was gone, sunk by a single submarine, destroyed in 10 days. The admirals who rushed her into service would have to answer for their decision. The engineers who certified her seaworthiness would have to explain how 4 torpedoes killed a ship designed to survive 20. And the families of 435 dead sailors would have to be told something, anything, except the truth. The cover-up is about to begin, and it will last for decades. 4 torpedoes, 7 hours, 72,000 tons. Gone. In Parts 1 and 2, we witnessed the impossible. Commander Joseph Enright, a man carrying 18 months of failure, tracked the largest aircraft carrier ever built through the darkness of the Pacific. He predicted her course. He positioned his submarine perfectly. He fired 6 torpedoes and put 4 into her side. And then we watched Shinano die. We saw the flooding spread through incomplete bulkheads. We saw Captain Toshio Abe fight desperately to save his ship. We saw 435 men perish as the unsinkable carrier rolled onto her side and plunged to the bottom of the ocean. But the story does not end with Shinano's final plunge. Because what happened after the sinking is almost as remarkable as the sinking itself. The Japanese government launched the most aggressive cover-up in their naval history. The American Navy refused to believe what Enright had accomplished, and the families of 1,400 dead sailors were told lies that would persist for decades. This is the story of how both sides tried to bury the truth, and how the truth refused to stay buried. Let us begin in Tokyo, November 29, 1944. The same morning, Shinano disappeared beneath the waves. The Imperial Japanese Navy headquarters receives a coded message from the destroyer Isokaze. The message is brief, devastating. Shinano torpedoed. Shinano sunk. 1,400 casualties. The reaction in Tokyo is immediate and absolute. This information must be suppressed. Understand what Shinano represented to Japan in late 1944. The war is going catastrophically. American forces have liberated the Philippines. American bombers are reducing Japanese cities to ashes. The Imperial Navy has been shattered at Leyte Gulf just 1 month earlier. Japan has lost most of her aircraft carriers, most of her battleships, most of her experienced pilots. Shinano was supposed to be the answer. The supercarrier that would turn the tide. The proof that Japanese engineering could still produce weapons capable of matching American industrial might. And now she is gone. Sunk on her maiden voyage. Destroyed by a single submarine before she ever launched a single aircraft. The propaganda disaster alone would be catastrophic. If the Japanese people learned that their greatest ship had been sunk in 10 days, morale would collapse. If the Americans learned about Shinano's existence and destruction, they would trumpet the victory across every radio station in the Pacific. So the Imperial Navy made a decision. Shinano never existed. The orders go out within hours. All records of Shinano's construction are to be classified at the highest level. All personnel involved in her building are forbidden to speak of her. The families of the dead are to be told their loved ones died in training accidents or classified operations. No memorial services, no public acknowledgement, nothing. The cover-up is remarkably thorough. Even most Japanese naval officers do not know Shinano existed. The shipyard workers who built her are scattered to different assignments. The survivors of the sinking are isolated and sworn to secrecy. For the Japanese public, Shinano simply never was. But secrets have a way of leaking. And the Japanese cover-up creates an unexpected problem. The surviving officers from Shinano know what happened. They know their ship was rushed into service incomplete. They know the watertight doors were not properly installed. They know the crew was undertrained and the damage control systems were not operational. They know that 1,400 men died because admirals made a decision to risk an unfinished ship rather than wait for proper completion. This knowledge festers. Some officers blame themselves. Some blame Captain Abe. Some blame the high command. But all of them know the truth, and all of them are forbidden to speak it. Meanwhile, 6,000 miles away, a different kind of disbelief is unfolding. Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, December 1944. USS Archerfish has completed her patrol and returned to base. Commander Joseph Enright files his patrol report. And the intelligence officers who read it think he has lost his mind. According to Enright's report, he tracked and sank an aircraft carrier displacing approximately 60 to 70,000 tons. A carrier larger than any ship in the American fleet. A carrier that does not appear in any intelligence database. A carrier that, according to everything the Navy knows about Japanese shipbuilding, should not exist. The intelligence officers are skeptical, politely skeptical at first, then increasingly dismissive. Commander, we have reviewed your patrol report. You claim to have sunk a carrier of 70,000 tons. Are you certain about those numbers? Enright stands his ground. He knows what he saw through that periscope. He knows the size of the silhouette. He knows no ship in the Japanese fleet matches what he observed. But he cannot prove it. He has no photographs, no debris samples, no confirmation from any other source. Just his observations, his calculations, and the 4 explosions he heard through Archerfish's hull. The intelligence community reaches a compromise. They credit Enright with sinking a large aircraft carrier, probably Shokaku class, approximately 28,000 tons. This is less than half what Enright claims. It is also completely wrong. Shokaku was already sunk months earlier. But the Navy cannot credit a kill they cannot verify. And they cannot verify a ship they do not know exists. For Enright, this is a different kind of failure. He knows he accomplished something extraordinary. He knows he sank the biggest target any submarine has ever engaged, but no one believes him. The Navy cross he receives is for sinking a carrier. Not the carrier. Not the largest warship ever destroyed by a submarine, just a carrier. One among many. It is recognition, but not vindication, and the difference matters. But history has a way of revealing its secrets. And the truth about Shinano begins to emerge from unexpected sources. American codebreakers have been intercepting Japanese naval communications throughout the war. Most of these intercepts are routine. Fleet movements, supply convoys, patrol schedules. But in the weeks following November 29th, the codebreakers noticed something unusual. Japanese naval communications contain references to a catastrophic loss, a carrier, a secret project, 1,400 casualties. The pieces do not fit together cleanly. The Japanese are being deliberately vague even in coded communications. But something massive has happened, something the Japanese are desperate to conceal. The first real breakthrough comes from a captured Japanese officer in early 1945. Under interrogation, he mentions a supercarrier under construction at Yokosuka. A ship larger than Yamato. A ship being built in absolute secrecy. The intelligence officers are intrigued but skeptical. A carrier larger than Yamato, impossible. The Japanese do not have the resources for such a project, but they file the report and continue gathering information. More pieces emerge. A recovered document mentions hull number 110. Another captured sailor describes working on a massive carrier at Yokosuka. A decoded message references the loss of a capital ship in late November. Slowly, impossibly, the picture begins to form. And then the war ends. August 1945. Japan surrenders. American forces occupy the home islands, and investigators begin accessing records that were classified at the highest levels of the Imperial Navy. What they find is staggering. It is Shinano. Hull number 110, originally laid down as the third Yamato-class battleship, converted to an aircraft carrier in 1942, displacing 72,000 tons fully loaded, the largest aircraft carrier ever built. Commissioned November 19, 1944. Sunk November 29, 1944. 10 days. The intelligence officers who dismissed Enright's claims are stunned. He was right. Not approximately right. Not partially right. Exactly right. His estimate of 60 to 70,000 tons was within the margin of error for a periscope observation at night. His description of the silhouette matches Shinano perfectly. His account of the attack, the pursuit, the calculations, the firing solution, all of it was precisely accurate. Commander Joseph Enright did not sink a Shokaku-class carrier. He sank the largest aircraft carrier ever built. He sank a ship designed to survive 20 torpedo hits with just 4. He sank a vessel that the Japanese believed was unsinkable. The official records are corrected. Archerfish is credited with destroying 72,000 tons of enemy shipping in a single attack. This record stands to this day. No submarine in history has ever sunk a larger warship. Enright receives formal recognition. His Navy Cross citation is updated to reflect the true nature of his accomplishment. But more importantly, his reputation is restored. The failure of May 1943, the carrier he missed, is finally erased. Not by another ordinary kill. By the greatest submarine kill in naval history. But what did Shinano's loss actually mean for Japan? This is where the story transforms from a tale of one submarine and one carrier into something with far greater historical significance. Shinano was not just a ship. She was a symbol of Japanese naval power. She was proof that Japan could still build super weapons. She was the physical embodiment of hope in a war that was already lost. And she was gone in 10 days. The strategic impact was devastating. Japan had invested years of shipyard capacity, hundreds of thousands of man-hours, and irreplaceable materials into Shinano. All of it was now at the bottom of the Pacific. The 1,400 men who died included experienced sailors and engineers who could not be replaced. The aircraft and equipment she carried were desperately needed elsewhere. But the psychological impact was even worse. The officers who knew about Shinano, who had pinned their hopes on her, now understood that hope was meaningless. If the unsinkable could be sunk, if the largest carrier ever built could be destroyed on her maiden voyage, then nothing was safe. Nothing could turn the tide. Japan was going to lose the war, and there was nothing anyone could do to stop it. The cover-up continued through the end of the war and beyond. Even after Japan surrendered, even after American investigators discovered the truth, the Japanese government maintained its silence. Families of the dead were not told the real circumstances. Veterans of the disaster were discouraged from speaking. The shame was too great, the failure too absolute. It was not until the 1950s and 1960s that the full story of Shinano began to emerge publicly. Japanese historians, freed from wartime censorship, began documenting the disaster. American researchers gained access to classified naval archives. Survivors finally felt safe to tell their stories. And the world learned about the 10-day carrier, the ship that was designed to survive 20 torpedo hits and sank after 4. The greatest secret of the Japanese Imperial Navy, destroyed by a single American submarine, commanded by a man with everything to prove. Today, Shinano rests on the floor of the Pacific Ocean, approximately 35 miles southeast of Cape Shiono, Japan. Her exact location has never been confirmed. The water is too deep for conventional salvage. The records of her final position were imprecise. She lies in darkness, her flight deck still angled toward the surface. Her hull still bearing the scars of 4 torpedo impacts. 1,400 men rest with her. Men who never had a chance to fight. Men who died because admirals made a decision to risk an incomplete ship. Men whose families were lied to for decades. But the story has one final chapter. A chapter about the men who survived. About the man who fired the torpedoes. About what happened to them after the war ended and the truth finally emerged. Commander Joseph Enright went on to serve with distinction through the remainder of the war. He retired from the Navy as a captain. He wrote about his experiences. He spoke about that night in the Pacific when he tracked the largest target any submarine commander had ever engaged. And he lived long enough to see his accomplishment officially recognized, to see the records corrected, to see his name entered into naval history as the commander who achieved the impossible. Captain Toshio Abe, the man who commanded Shinano on her only voyage, survived the sinking. He was pulled from the water by one of the destroyers. He testified about the disaster. He bore witness to what happened, and he carried the weight of 1,400 deaths for the rest of his life. Some historians blame him for the loss. Others argue he was given an impossible task, an incomplete ship, an untrained crew, a voyage that should never have been attempted. The truth, as always, lies somewhere in between. Shinano was doomed before she ever left the shipyard. The decision to rush her into service to risk an incomplete vessel on a short voyage was made by admirals who were not aboard when the torpedoes hit. Abe did everything a captain could do. He fought to save his ship. He made the decisions that training and experience dictated, but no amount of skill could overcome the fundamental problem. Shinano was not ready. And the ocean does not forgive ships that are not ready. In Part 4, we will explore the final chapter of this story. We will examine the legacy of Shinano and Archerfish. We will ask what lessons this disaster taught the navies of the world. We will follow the fates of the men involved, the survivors, and the families of the dead. And we will answer the question that has haunted historians for 80 years. Could Shinano have been saved? Was her loss inevitable from the moment she was commissioned? Or was there a moment, a decision, a single choice that could have changed everything? The answer may surprise you. Because the greatest submarine kill in history was also one of the most preventable disasters in naval warfare. And the men who made it happen on both sides knew exactly what they were doing. Let us take a moment to remember where this story began. November 28, 1944. A single American submarine hunting through the darkness of the Pacific. A commander named Joseph Enright, carrying 18 months of failure on his shoulders. A target so massive that no submarine had ever engaged anything like it. 4 hours of desperate pursuit. 40 minutes of patient stalking. 6 torpedoes fired into the night. 4 hits. And then 7 hours of chaos aboard the largest aircraft carrier ever built as she slowly, impossibly sank beneath the waves. 72,000 tons. 1,400 lives. 10 days from commissioning to destruction. We watched the Japanese government bury the truth. We watched the American Navy refuse to believe what Enright had accomplished. We watched history slowly reveal its secrets as classified documents emerged and survivors finally spoke. But the story has one final chapter. A chapter about what happened to the men who lived through that night. A chapter about the legacy that outlasted them all. A chapter with a twist that almost nobody knows. Because the greatest submarine kill in history left marks that are still visible today, and the man who fired those torpedoes carried secrets of his own. Joseph Francis Enright returned from the Pacific a hero, though it took years for the world to understand just how great his accomplishment truly was. When the war ended in August 1945, Enright was still commanding Archerfish. He had completed multiple war patrols. He had earned the respect of his crew and his superiors. But the full recognition of what he achieved on November 29, 1944, would not come until the occupation of Japan revealed the truth about Shinano. When the records were finally corrected, when naval intelligence confirmed that Archerfish had indeed sunk a 72,000-ton supercarrier, Enright's place in history was secured. He received the Navy Cross, the second highest decoration for valor in the United States Navy. His citation was updated to reflect the true tonnage of his kill, and his name was entered into the official records as the commander who achieved the single largest submarine kill in naval history. But what happened to Joseph Enright after the medals were pinned and the parades ended? He continued serving in the Navy, rising through the ranks with quiet distinction. He commanded other submarines. He trained other officers. He passed on the lessons he had learned in the Pacific to a new generation of submariners. In 1963, Joseph Enright retired from the United States Navy with the rank of captain. He had served his country for over 3 decades. He had commanded multiple vessels. He had survived one of the most dangerous forms of warfare ever devised. And he had accomplished something that no other submarine commander in history had ever matched. But Enright was never a man who sought glory. Those who knew him described him as thoughtful, methodical, and deeply humble. He rarely spoke about the night he sank Shinano unless directly asked. When he did speak, he emphasized the skill of his crew, the reliability of his boat, and the element of luck that put him in the right place at the right time. He deflected praise. He credited others. He behaved, in other words, exactly as you would expect from a man who had carried the weight of failure for 18 months, and understood that success and failure are often separated by the thinnest of margins. In 1987, Joseph Enright published a book about his experiences. It was titled Shinano, The Sinking of Japan's Secret Supership. For the first time, he told the complete story of that night in his own words. The 4-hour pursuit, the calculated gamble to race ahead, the moment he saw that impossible silhouette through the periscope, the firing sequence, the explosions, and the uncertainty that followed as Archerfish slipped away into the depths, not knowing if the target had survived or sunk. The book was well received by naval historians and submarine enthusiasts. It provided details that had never been published before, and it cemented Enright's legacy as not just a skilled commander, but a thoughtful chronicler of his own experience. Joseph Enright died on July 21, 2000, at the age of 91. He had outlived most of his crew. He had outlived most of his contemporaries from the submarine service. And he had lived long enough to see the 50th anniversary of his greatest achievement, to attend commemorations, to shake hands with historians and veterans who understood what he had accomplished. He was buried with full military honors. His grave marker identifies him as a captain in the United States Navy. It does not mention Shinano. It does not need to. Those who know naval history know the name Joseph Enright, and those who do not can look it up. But the legacy of that night extends far beyond one man's career. The sinking of Shinano fundamentally changed how navies around the world thought about aircraft carriers, submarine warfare, and the relationship between the two. Before Shinano, the conventional wisdom held that large, heavily armored carriers were essentially immune to submarine attack. The math seemed simple. A carrier could absorb multiple torpedo hits. A submarine could only fire a limited number of torpedoes. Therefore, any competent carrier would survive any submarine engagement. Shinano destroyed that logic. She proved that even the largest, most heavily armored carrier in the world could be sunk by a single submarine with a well-executed attack. She proved that armor and compartmentalization were not enough. She proved that the human factors, crew training, damage control capability, and ship readiness mattered more than any amount of steel. The lesson was not lost on naval planners. In the decades following World War II, carrier design shifted away from the battleship armor philosophy that Shinano represented. Modern carriers are built with different priorities. They emphasize aircraft capacity, operational flexibility, and defensive systems designed to prevent torpedo hits in the first place rather than survive them. The anti-submarine warfare capabilities of modern carrier battle groups are vastly more sophisticated than anything that existed in 1944. Destroyers, helicopters, fixed-wing aircraft, and submarines all work together to create defensive perimeters that extend for hundreds of miles around the carrier. The goal is simple: never let an enemy submarine get close enough to fire. This philosophy emerged directly from the lessons of Shinano and other carrier losses during World War II. The U.S. Navy invested billions of dollars in anti-submarine warfare technology during the Cold War. Sonar systems became more sensitive. Torpedoes became more accurate. Submarine detection became a science unto itself. And at the heart of all this investment was a single terrifying lesson. If a submarine gets through, even the mightiest ship can die. The submarine force itself evolved as well. Modern attack submarines are specifically designed to hunt and kill enemy capital ships. They are faster, quieter, and more lethal than anything Joseph Enright commanded. A modern Los Angeles-class or Virginia-class submarine carries weapons that would have seemed like science fiction in 1944. Torpedoes that can track targets autonomously. Cruise missiles that can strike land targets from hundreds of miles away. Sensors that can detect enemy ships at ranges Enright could only dream of. But the fundamental principles remain the same: patience, calculation, positioning, the willingness to wait for the perfect shot. These are the qualities that made Enright successful, and they are still taught to submarine commanders today. The story of Archerfish versus Shinano is studied at naval academies around the world. It appears in textbooks on submarine warfare, naval strategy, and military history. It is used to illustrate principles of tactical patience, target selection, and the importance of crew readiness. Every year, new classes of naval officers learn about the night a single American submarine destroyed the largest carrier ever built. And every year, instructors emphasize the same lessons. Know your enemy. Know your capabilities. Position yourself for success. And when the moment comes, do not hesitate. But the deepest lesson of Shinano is not about tactics or technology. It is about institutions and the decisions they make under pressure. The Japanese Navy did not lose Shinano because of American superiority. They lost her because they made a choice. They chose to risk an incomplete ship rather than wait for proper completion. They chose speed over safety. They chose the fear of American bombers over the certainty of submarine threats. And that choice killed 1,400 men. This is a pattern that repeats throughout military history. The pressure to act, to deploy, to engage often overwhelms the wisdom to wait, to prepare, to ensure readiness. Leaders face impossible choices. Risk the incomplete weapon now, or risk losing it before it can be used at all. There is no formula for making such decisions correctly. But Shinano stands as a monument to what happens when the wrong choice is made. She was not sunk by American torpedoes. She was sunk by Japanese decisions. The torpedoes merely finished what the admirals had started. Consider the parallels to other military disasters. The Titanic rushing through ice fields to set a speed record. The Space Shuttle Challenger launching despite engineer warnings about cold weather. The Chernobyl reactor pushed beyond safe limits by operators under pressure to meet targets. In each case, the technology was not inherently flawed. The humans operating it made choices that transformed manageable risks into catastrophic failures. Shinano belongs in this category. Her armor was adequate. Her compartmentalization was sound. Her design was revolutionary. But none of that mattered because she was sent to sea before she was ready. And now we come to the detail that almost nobody knows. The twist that historians discovered only decades after the war ended. When Japanese naval records were fully analyzed in the 1980s and 1990s, researchers found something remarkable. Shinano was not supposed to sail on November 28, 1944. The original plan called for her to depart on November 30th, 2 days later. This would have allowed additional time to install watertight doors, test damage control systems, and train the crew on basic procedures. But on November 27th, intelligence reports indicated that American aircraft might attack Yokosuka within days. The decision was made to advance the departure by 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 days. If Shinano had sailed on her original schedule, she would have passed through the waters where Archerfish was patrolling on December 1st, not November 29th. And on December 1st, Archerfish was not there. She had moved to a different patrol area. The encounter that produced the greatest submarine kill in history was the result of a 48-hour schedule change. If the Japanese had waited 2 more days, Shinano would have reached Kure safely. She would have been completed properly. Her watertight doors would have been installed. Her crew would have been trained. And when she finally faced combat, she might have lived up to her unsinkable reputation. Instead, a scheduling decision made in a moment of fear sent her directly into the path of a submarine, commanded by a man with everything to prove. Joseph Enright was in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, because Japanese admirals were afraid of American bombers. The greatest submarine kill in history was enabled by the greatest stroke of luck in submarine history. But here is what separates luck from destiny. Enright was ready. When opportunity presented itself, he had the skill, the training, and the determination to seize it. Another commander might have hesitated. Another commander might have miscalculated. Another commander might have let the target slip away into the darkness. Enright did not. He tracked. He calculated. He positioned. He fired. And he made history. So what does this story teach us? It teaches us that preparation matters more than luck. Enright was lucky to encounter Shinano, but he earned his success through years of training and months of patient patrol. It teaches us that institutions can be their own worst enemies. The Japanese Navy built an unsinkable carrier and then sank it themselves through rushed decisions and incomplete preparation. It teaches us that redemption is always possible. Enright carried failure for 18 months, and then he erased it with a single night of perfect execution. And it teaches us that the line between triumph and disaster is often thinner than we imagine. 48 hours. That was the margin. 48 hours separated Shinano's destruction from her survival. 48 hours separated Enright's redemption from continued obscurity. 48 hours changed the course of naval history. From a submarine commander who missed his shot in May 1943, carrying the weight of failure through 18 months of doubt, to the man who achieved the greatest submarine kill in naval history. Joseph Enright proved that second chances exist for those prepared to seize them. 4 torpedoes, 7 hours, 72,000 tons, 1,400 lives, one night that changed everything. That is the power of preparation meeting opportunity. That is the cost of rushing what should not be rushed. That is the story of USS Archerfish and the supercarrier Shinano. And if this story resonated with you, if you found yourself gripped by the tale of one man's redemption and one empire's fatal mistake, then know this. World War II is filled with stories like this one. Stories of impossible victories and preventable disasters. Stories of ordinary men who accomplished extraordinary things. Stories that deserve to be remembered. Because those who forget history are condemned to repeat it, and those who remember it are inspired to exceed it. 72,000 tons. 10 days. Unsinkable. Gone. Remember Shinano. Remember Archerfish. Remember Joseph Enright. And remember that in war as in life, the biggest targets often fall the hardest and second chances favor those who refuse to give up.